Now, it looks like LulzSec and Anonymous have just declared war on governments and big banks. So yesterday, LulzSec released a statement to announce that the two groups had joined forces and are launching what they call Operation Anti-Security. In it, they wrote, "Together we can defend ourselves so that our privacy is not overrun by profiteering gluttons. And if you're aware of the corruption, expose it now in the name of anti-security." Now, according to the statement, the top priority is to steal and leak any classified government information, including email spools and documentation. And the prime targets are banks and other high-ranking establishments. Now, so far, LulzSec has done a pretty convincing job of exposing the government and security firms' very poor security on their websites. But now that LulzSec and Anonymous have stepped it up a notch, might the government do the same in return? The Obama administration is already pressing Congress to create harsher penalties for breaking into government computers and putting national security at stake. But can law enforcement really keep up with unknown hackers? Joining me to discuss this is Joshua Grinsbich, Cybersecurity Fellow at the Center for Democracy and Technology. Joshua, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Now, of course, hackers didn't just appear this year. They've been around for a long time, but I feel like it's being done in a very public manner now, thanks to groups like Anonymous and LulzSec. Do you think that we're seeing something different begin to emerge, a larger movement?
I think what we're seeing is actually a number of different kinds of hacking events all appear at once. So, for example, we had the Sony and Epsilon data breach events that were basically criminal activity. And then we saw the national security threat that was posed by the breaking into Google accounts of high-level government officials. LulzSec and Anonymous are, in some sense, almost a slightly lower level threat than those kinds of threats. But again, we're seeing them all at once, and that, as a group, makes those threats seem more dangerous.
Well, yeah, I mean, LulzSec and Anonymous, you could say LulzSec, obviously, initially they said they were just doing it for the lulz. Anonymous was a little more politically active, but now the two are joining forces. I guess you could say that DDoS attacks aren't really a grave danger to national security by any means, but now that they've actually gone after CIA.gov, now that they've actually touched upon Senate.gov, are we going to see a massive reaction from the government now they feel like they're being personally attacked?
I think that is, in some sense, the biggest potential fallout from this kind of thing. When you see people that design not terribly dangerous attacks in a way that makes them publicity garnering, then all of a sudden policymakers see that, and they see a very visible threat that may not be as much of an actual threat as you know, a network security engineer might have it, but that can garner a very strong response as a reaction.
Well, I mean, we've already seen, at least reportedly, that's what the officials or law enforcement claims, that they've arrested members of Anonymous, be it in Spain or when they arrested people here within the U.S. But do you really think that that's something that they should be devoting their scarce resources to, or are there much more, serious hackers and black cats and people that they have to be worried about?
Right. I think that there are much more serious events that they do need to be worried about. And in fact, we've seen examples of that, as I said earlier, in the last 2 months. We've seen very serious break-ins to the internal networks of corporations that deal with United States national security secrets. We've seen problems that are potentially will lead to the identity theft of many millions of Americans. And these kinds of LulzSec and Anonymous activities don't really measure up to those.
But do you think it's just the typical embarrassment problem with the government, right? I mean, we see, let's say, we see the government waging a war against whistleblowers right now, and obviously WikiLeaks, although to this date, there have been no confirmations from any politicians, from any military officials that any lives were actually put into jeopardy or anybody was actually killed because of any of the WikiLeaks disclosures. But you could always say that because it's just something that embarrassed the government, like so many of those diplomatic cables do, then they will fight tooth and nail to do whatever they can to go after them. I think that LulzSec especially has done a pretty good job of exposing the fact that the government itself is vulnerable, that some of these security firms that the government relies on to fake hack its websites are also incredibly vulnerable. So I'm just wondering if we're going to see this incredible tenacity because it's just caused embarrassment for them.
I think we will see some of that. And actually, I think that might lead to one of the biggest problems that we see in the cybersecurity arena today, which is the government inserting itself into the private sector internet. And that's because, the government says it's not secure enough. We see all these security problems. At the same time, where we're seeing things like these hacks of the CIA government website is on government security sites. Therefore, the question sort of becomes, is the government really the right group of people to be securing the private sector internet?
Well, what do you make of this this project that they announced last week, this pilot program, in fact, that the NSA is doing, where they're partnering with private companies because they're trying to secure these contractors?
Right.
I kind of had a feeling that they were already doing that. I mean, is that naive of me, or is that stupid to just assume that they're already working with private companies and, you know, doing whatever they can to spy on people all the time?
Right. I think that what they were doing before was working with the private companies on sort of a one-off basis. Like, I'm a private company. I see something that concerns me. I call in the NSA. The NSA works with me. This is a more systematic pilot program. And actually, from our perspective, that's a pilot program that's being done very well. It's a pilot program that takes into account the privacy needs of users by sharing signatures from the NSA, securities of signatures of malware and other bad things entering into private sector networks, sharing them out from the NSA to those private sector networks, but not sharing any information back to the NSA from what gets caught from those signatures. And therefore, comparatively speaking, that seems to be a fairly benign security pilot program.
Okay, now I want to ask you what you think of the fact that the Obama administration right now is pushing Congress, trying to get them to legislate to move up the maximum penalty, right? Currently, if you break into a government computer and they're off the excuse that they always use, national security is at stake, there's a 10-year maximum prison sentence. Now they actually want to make it a 20-year maximum prison sentence.
And they want to add mandatory minimums so that you have to get at least 3 years for breaking into a computer. We think that that is a little dubious, mostly because the statute that they're thinking of amending, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, is actually a statute that's been used in some very broad and troubling ways.
As they always are.
As they always are. It's been used to prosecute people who violated terms of service on a website, or people who have violated their contractual acceptable use policies as employees of a company.
Well, is there any way that they can actually use that against LulzSec or Anonymous with anything that they have done, or maybe what they are planning on doing with this Operation Anti-Security, since they're saying that governments are one of their targets?
Right. I think a number of the activities that Anonymous and LulzSec have participated in and contemplate participating in the future would fall under the ambit of that statute. And so now the statute's penalties are doubled. I think it's very important to clarify what exactly is covered by that statute before we go about extending the penalties.
Okay, now lastly, I think that, you know, in general right now there is this mood around the world, thanks to the financial crisis, thanks to the fact that it was a lot of banks that brought down the entire economy. There is this anti-financial institution, anti-government mood. So I'm just wondering, I mean, if Anonymous and LulzSec actually play their cards right, if they don't start going after minor figures and they do get some big leaks out there, I mean, do you think that it could be a bit of a game-changing event?
I think that it could be the kind of thing that would awaken people to the democratic potential of the internet. And we've already seen a number of events like that in Egypt and in Iran and in Syria, as we've sort of seen the democratization of the internet. That said, I think that the real power of the internet is in that kind of democratic protest, the organization of people, more than it's in the kind of social protest that you see with LulzSec and Anonymous.
All right, Josh, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It depends, I guess, on what the information is that they get out there, what the leaks are, right? That's what always inspires people. Thank you so much.